I'd like to call this Monday, September 24th meeting of the City Commission to order and ask those who wish to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, has roll been taken?
It has. All are present tonight.
Thank you. We have 2 items under proclamations and presentations this evening. I would like anyone who would like to join me at the podium for a proclamation in support of United Way Week to go ahead and join me now. Whole board, huh? Most of it.
A lot of us.
A lot of them. Proclamation states that whereas United Way envisions a strong community where everyone has the opportunity to achieve their potential through quality education, financial stability, and healthy lifestyles, and whereas United Way provides leadership and resources to improve the quality of life in our community by generating revenue, creating awareness, and engaging volunteers, and whereas United Way has invested more than $6 million over the past decade in support of programs and services offered in partnership with 49 local nonprofit organizations, and whereas United Way of Isabella County is committed to being a good steward of the community resources that are entrusted to its care, and whereas United Way of Isabella County provides the citizens of Mount Pleasant an opportunity to give, advocate, and volunteer in support of our community. Now, therefore, I, Allison Quast-Lentz, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, do hereby proclaim September 23rd to the 29th, 2018 as United Way Week in Mount Pleasant, and I encourage the residents of Mount Pleasant to celebrate the more than 60 years of community investment provided throughout United Way, especially as it kicks off the 2018-2019 community campaign this week. Thank you so much for being here. Annie Sanders is the new
Yes,
CEO.
I'm Annie Sanders, brand new president and CEO at United Way of Gratiot and Isabella counties. On behalf of our staff and our board of directors that are here in attendance, thank you for this proclamation and thank you for letting us be here. It is because of the support of all of the citizens of Mount Pleasant, Isabella, and Gratiot County that we're able to do what we do. Because everybody gives a little and kicks in, we're able to raise $1 million, and that's just what we did last year, and we are able to then invest that money back into so many agencies and so many organizations that are making a profound impact on those within our counties. So thank you very much.
And I just want to also thank, I know the city staff participates in United Way Giving program, and I really appreciate that with our city staff here in the City Hall. So thank you for those staff members that do that. All right. Next, we have a presentation, one of our monthly, we're doing these monthly now, right?
Correct.
Presentations from our staff member. We have Fire Lieutenant Randy Keeler here this evening.
Sorry.
You're okay.
Thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit tonight about what I do with my job. And as stated, my name is Randy Keeler, and my rank at the fire department is lieutenant, and my job responsibilities are like a fire marshal. I've worked for the city since 1994, and I've been working in this position now for just over 3 years. And tonight I'm going to share with you 5 of the primary job responsibilities that I do on a day-to-day basis, and some of those details that are associated with those job responsibilities. So the first one I want to talk about is plan review. Developers submit plans to the planning department, and the plans show a graphic representation of the arrangement of buildings, parking, drives, landscaping, and any other structure that is part of the development project. My specific role in plan review considers the adopted fire code aspect for water supply, emergency access, and specific fire codes. I work with 3 different governmental agencies for plan review: the city, Union Township, and Central Michigan University. Each agency has a different process for plan review, and I will explain each one. Plan review for the city of Mount Pleasant. I work closely with Jacob Kane, the city planner, Brian Kench, a building official, and Stacy Tawari, the city engineer. Developers begin by contacting our planning department. Pre-application meetings are scheduled every Wednesday so that the developers have a chance to sit down with city staff to discuss the overall requirements. The pre-application meetings have been proven to be very helpful and informative for business owners seeking to expand or develop in our community. We also have internal review process where just the committee members review and may approve certain types of projects. The scope of these projects are usually small and don't require additional city committee approvals. This too has been very beneficial in speeding up the approval process. After a project has been approved, I begin working with our building official and the Isabella County inspectors through the different phases of the construction. For Union Township, I work closely with Peter Gallinat, the township planner, Kim Smith, public works coordinator, and Steve Kreutzer, the building official. Projects are submitted to the township and site plans are delivered to the fire department for my review. Once the plans have been reviewed, comments are returned to the township and the process moves through their approval committees. After a project has been approved, I begin working with their building official and the Isabella County inspectors through the different phases of construction. For Central Michigan University, I work with Linda Slater, the Director of Engineering and Planning. After CMU has developed a conceptual plan, Linda and the assigned project manager invite myself and other city employees to attend a pre-construction meeting. During that meeting, we are able to provide input and CMU makes adjustments accordingly. After the adjustments have been made, then the plans move forward to final design. After the project is approved, I begin working with the CMU project managers, the state inspectors through the different phases of construction. My second responsibility that I do on a day-to-day basis are inspections. I've broken this into 2 categories, new construction and existing properties. I am involved in almost all new construction inspections regardless of whether or not fire protection systems are installed. I inspect all new businesses or commercial properties and some residential properties that are involved in our rental licensing program. Generally, most new properties require anywhere from 2 to 4 inspections. Large projects like hotels, big box stores, and others may require dozens of inspections and many hours of involvement. For new construction, I work with the various county inspectors and the building officials through the different phases of construction. Inspections for existing properties. I conduct annual inspections for the following types of properties. Our mixed-use properties. These are similar to our downtown properties to where we have a business below and our residential above. I also inspect bars or nightclubs, hotels, and special event situations that might have large tents or gatherings. I only inspect existing properties within the city limits. I also follow up with any fire calls that may have occurred because the fire protection systems were not functioning properly or the systems were found to be out of service. I'm also involved in code and ordinance compliance. I work with the department in keeping our codes and ordinances current. Since I've been in this position, I've been directly involved in the adoption of our 2012 International Fire Code. I also facilitated the current adoption of our 2012 version of the International Property Maintenance Code as amended. I have been involved in providing input for various ordinances that might directly or indirectly affect the fire department or the city. The fourth responsibility I would like to talk about is fire investigation. For fire investigation, my primary role is lead investigator. The Department of Public Safety currently has 4 team members. Myself, Sergeant Clark, Police Officer Standen and Williams. Our role as a team is to investigate fires within the city limits to determine cause and origin. For fires located within Union Township, we utilize Officer Hoskin and Sheriff Maine. And the last and final job responsibility I'd like to share with you tonight about is fire suppression and administration. The command structure of the fire department is fire chief, assistant fire chief, and then my position as lieutenant. I am involved in the decision-making process at various levels and work as a team to ensure that we are following the city's policies and departmental procedures. In the absence of the fire chief or the assistant chief, I would assume one of their roles administratively and tactically during emergency incidents. That concludes 5 of the primary responsibilities that I have with my position. I would like to share with you tonight 2 projects that I'm working on currently. One is our rental licensing process. Recently, I've been working with our new fire department records person to help improve the rental licensing process. We are creating a workflow that will allow easier access for the business community, as well as creating a reduction in time and printing costs. The 3 primary areas we hope to impact include application and payment process, inspection scheduling, and forms. We will improve these areas by using email billing options, pre-scheduled inspections with email notifications, and fillable forms that are available online. And the second project that I'm currently working on is our fire code update. I'm working on the adoption of our 2015 International Fire Code. Code versions used are typically on a 3-year cycle. So this is a reciprocating process every time there is a new version available. I'm working with city staff from City Hall and those in the community that might be impacted by the adoption of our next fire code. I've contacted various agencies seeking their input so that we can make an informed decision regarding the adoption of the next fire code. In closing, again, I want to thank you for allowing me to talk about what I do in my position. I know this is a Cliff Note version, and it's hard to condense everything in and talk about all the things that I'm involved in. But I've worked in this position for just over 3 years, and I've enjoyed working and meeting many new people, both within the city and outside of our community. I've also enjoyed working with the different agencies regarding plan review and inspections. It has allowed me to work on building good working relationships with those agencies, and I, again, look forward to continuing that path. So at this time, I'd entertain any questions that you might have for me regarding what I do.
Does the commission have any questions this evening? Commissioner Kulik.
Tony?
I just have one comment. I'd like to thank you for your help as we've been working on a property maintenance code citywide.
Thank you.
I think the commission thanks you for doing a great job and being a great steward of our community and resources. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Does the commission or any staff have any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I will open the first public input opportunity for this evening. We do have a public hearing for item number 10, so if you're here to speak about a tax abatement application, we ask that you hold your comments until that opportunity. We also have a public hearing at the end of the meeting for any city-related issues on the agenda or not on the agenda. But at this opportunity, I'd open it up to anyone who's here to speak on any items on the agenda other than item number 10. I ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes and give your name and address. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charlotte Eisen, and I live at 1015 East Maple Street, and I'm representing our street. We received a letter in March regarding a widening of the street, or excuse me, narrowing of the street and reconstruction of the street itself. You all have a letter with the neighbors' signatures on it regarding the narrowing of the street. We would like to keep that street as wide as it is because it is a beautiful street, a signature street, and a street that leads right into the hospital. The only signage the hospital has is on Pickard and Brown and Mission and Maple. And that street is used to guide people to the hospital. We just take a lot of pride in our street and hope you can reconsider narrowing of that street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Omar Fakori. I'm located at 2642 Creek Bend Drive in Troy, Michigan. So I'm here today to discuss my concerns on the extensive application period being proposed for all medical marijuana facility types. I submitted my concerns in an email last week. Hopefully you've had a chance to read them. I'm going to highlight a few of my points. But really the key message is I want there to be some consideration for patients and patient access. You know, when I listened to the workshop session, you know, there was a significant focus on the business community, business interest, which is certainly a key stakeholder in all of this. But when focusing on patients and patients' access, you know, a decision of such a long window does have a significant impact on patients. So the way I see it, the unintended consequence of a 4-month application window is that patients will have no safe, convenient access to medicine for about 12 months. When you consider the LARA Phase 2 process, build out of your facility, special land use application approval, and then LARA comes on site and inspects your building, and then the board provides their final approval on your Phase 2. So we're talking about a 12-month window for patients to have access to medicine. And considering how long it's taken us to get to this point, you know, I think that's just an unreasonable burden for patients. So my question is, you know, to the commission really is, why are we willing to delay patient access to accommodate applicants that have such a small chance of being selected anyway? You know, it's a lottery. There's only a few select spots anyway. So whether you have 100 applicants or 1,000 applicants, it's such a small chance. So the benefit of having more applicants isn't really there, but in, you know, the result of it is patients actually end up suffering more. So I think that's a question I'd like to kind of pose to the commission. Also, when I watched the workshop, you know, the long period was considered to be more fair. And I'm just asking a question of who are we being more fair to? We clearly aren't being more fair to patients who will have to continually drive to Lansing 2 hours round trip to access their medicine. We aren't being fair to the city. We're really just deferring any revenue that's going to be generated from licensing fees or shared tax revenue. So I don't really see much upside to the city. It's not really being fair to the business community, especially those that have secured property interests, have paid, you know, non-refundable money for deposits, extensions, more extensions, considering how long this has taken. So my question is, who is it being more fair to? Because it's not clear to me. My last point that I wanted to highlight was when I listened to the workshop session, there was a lot of discussion about LARA and the backlog and how long it's taken LARA to kind of go through this process. So somebody that's gone through the process, it's not really true. LARA obviously has developed a rigorous process, but I think it's easy to blame any government agency or any government period for acting slow. But to provide some perspective on the process, I've gone through it, I submitted my application 3 months after the period opened. I don't have any big political connections. I wish I did. I don't have any large money funding me. I'm a small business owner, and I was able to get through the process in 3 months. So to say Laura is acting slow, I just don't. I'm just telling you it's not true. The way it works is when I submit my application to the state, it's not, hey Laura, give me an answer whether I'm approved or not. There's significant back and forth dialogue that occurs. So, for instance, they asked me, Omar, what are these financial transactions that you've made over the past 3 years? I'd provide a response to them. If I received an email at 12 o'clock, I'm providing a response to them at 2 o'clock. What you're seeing is a lot of applicants end up sitting on those requests from Laura for 2, 3, 4 weeks, trying to figure out what they want to do, how they want to respond. But it's important to me, so I provided a response immediately. So to kind of blame Laura, I think it's, there is some concern in the process itself, but there's significant weight on the applicant being responsive and providing a timely response. That's how I got through the process, and that's how I know other small business owners have gone through the process. So I just wanted to highlight that. So,
If you just want to wrap it up, for 5
okay.
minutes.
So I don't want to just provide an argument or kind of voice frustration. I did want to propose a solution that I think could be helpful to all stakeholders, so the business community, patients in the city, is why don't we consider having a provisioning center application window shorter, so that way patients can get access to medicine, and in the meantime, have a longer duration for growers and processors, so that more local applicants can get through the process, but won't impact patient access, a retail store for somebody to go into and buy their medicine. So that's just a solution that I've kind of come up with to kind of satisfy all stakeholders. So appreciate your consideration. I know this is kind of a one-way dialogue, so if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who has any comments for the commission on any agenda item? Seeing no one else, I will close this opportunity for public input and ask the city manager to go through the receipt of petitions and communications.
For this evening, under this section, you have our report on pending items. Also, you have the correspondence that we've received since about the middle of 2016 on sidewalk snow removal. I had previously indicated that we would accumulate all of those together so that you were reminded of the previous input you received as you consider taking on this issue over the next couple meetings. One new communication did come in that's in the packet from Jane Shippey of 1305 West Broadway, expressing concerns with her ability to clear the sidewalk by her house. But all of the other ones you previously received in a city commission packet since sometime in the middle of 2016. The next communication you have is the one that was indicated during the public comment period about the concerns expressed with the narrowing of Maple Street and the petition that was signed by various residents who live in that area. As you know, this street is proposed for reconstruction in 2019, and it's a total reconstruction including the water and sewer lines. The current street is anywhere between 40.5 or 41 feet wide from back of curb to back of curb. The reconstructed street will be approximately 37 feet wide, which will accommodate 2 driving lanes and parallel parking on both sides of the street, just like it currently has. This footprint meets the specifications that are outlined in our standard street specifications, the non-motorized transportation plan, the capital improvement plan, our zoning ordinance, and it's in compliance with Complete Streets to build our streets for all users, but not to overbuild them. We are in the survey phase to finalize the design for this project so that we can bid it earlier in the year. So if there's further information you need on this, we would like to know that soon so that we can stay on track to have that bid early in the year. The next communication is some correspondence we received regarding the zoning ordinance. Earlier this year, we had a general agreement with the Planning Commission that we wouldn't look at major changes to the zoning ordinance until it had been in place for 1 year. But based on conversations I had with two individuals, I made a commitment to pass on their concerns to you. One of them was from Mr. Tyler White, who was concerned about his ability to change one of his existing parking lots driveways from a gravel driveway to a paved driveway. And so he's expressed some concerns about his inability to do it at its current 16 feet all the way to the road. The other communication was a documentation of some conversations I had with Joe Olivieri about his concerns with applying the residential building codes to houses in the primarily Project 2000 area and his concern with how those fit in that area. And then the third piece of information we provided some information on has to do with situations where a commercial business has a parking lot that is non-conforming, and the fact that the ordinance allows them to maintain that parking lot, but if they get to a point where they have to reconstruct it, they would need to comply with the full code, just like they do with our stormwater ordinances. So I had committed I would bring all three of those pieces of information to you, and as you know, all of those pieces had strong rationale for them when they were incorporated into the new zoning ordinance. But if you want any more information on them, or if you want to consider referring those to the Planning Commission, we just need to know that so we could start that process if you desire. The other item that was in the packet was the minutes from the Planning Commission, both their regular and special meetings in August. And then on the dais tonight, you have two communications that were received. One is from Mr. Fakori that he just spoke about regarding the application deadline. And the second one was one that was received from Mr. Jakeway regarding some concerns with a sidewalk on one of the properties he has. And I don't have all the details on that communication, but I wanted to make sure that you had it, and we can follow up with additional information on that for you later. So those are all of our petitions and communications for this evening.
Commissioner Kulik.
I'd like to have the zoning issues referred to the Planning Commission so they can begin looking at them. I'm not saying that they need to be changed, but the Planning Commission is the one where that process needs to begin with, and they should be aware of it, and let them do some study on it, and if they feel that action should be taken, they can set the public hearings on one of them, two of them, or all three of them if they feel it's warranted.
Do you want, what do you?
I believe generally in the past when we've done referrals to the Planning Commission, we've either had unanimous consent to do that, or we've put it as an action item on an agenda for you to vote on. So I think we could either put it on the next agenda for you to vote on, or if all 7 of you unanimously believe that's the right thing to do, then we could refer it based on that.
Commissioner Ling?
I don't have any objection to our referring it on and just leaving it to them as to whether or not they want it to take action or to move forward, but I don't have any problem with the information at least being shared with the planner and with the Planning Commission, and then I think we can leave it to them to decide. So I would, in terms of unanimous consent, I would be comfortable with that.
I think maybe what I'm hearing is we should at least be giving them this information and kind of seeing how they feel comfort-wise, whether they want to wait the full year or whether they want to start the process of working towards changing. Is that what I'm hearing? We're not saying we want you to look at changing these. We're saying we want you to get this information and let us know whether you think the year is still a good time. That. Commissioner Gillis.
Our year mark is in January, right? Because we passed it the first or second meeting in January.
So it didn't go into effect till the end of February, so we were seeing the 1-year mark would be the end of February.
Commissioner Joseph?
I'm fine with referring those items to the Planning Commission. I just wanted to make more of a broad statement that I really appreciate all the feedback that we're getting from the community concerning the zoning ordinance and the snow and ice ordinance that's coming up. And just know that I think we really appreciate those comments and really value that input, and that especially with the snow and ice stuff. I don't think we have a final product. I think we're going to really look forward to the public hearing. So.
Are you more clear with?
So I think what I hear you saying is send the information to the Planning Commission, but let them decide if they want to take it up now or wait until the end of February. And you're okay if they decide to wait? Okay.
But that they should have the information now along with us, is what I'm hearing. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the petitions and communications? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. Are there any items that the commission wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Commissioner Gillis.
11B.
11B, okay. Anything else? Then I will ask the city manager to go through all the items on the agenda that have an asterisk next to them so that the commission can vote on those items in one lump sum.
So the first one is approval of your minutes of both your regular and closed meeting of September 10th, 2018. We're recommending one bid approval, and that's for the hiring of the consultant to complete our master plan process. As you'll recall, the Planning Commission and City Commission agreed on the scope of the work to be done through this process. 8 proposals were received and were reviewed by the subcommittee, which was comprised of representatives from the Planning Commission, the City Commission, the Mission Street DDA, the Parks and Rec Commission, and city staff. The subcommittee decided to invite 2 firms in for interview, and those public interviews occurred in August. The Planning Commission has recommended that the city contract with McKenna and Associates for the master plan process at a not to exceed cost of $150,000. The complete proposal received from McKenna and Associates is included in your packet, as this will be a multi-year effort with final approval taking place in 2020. The next item on your consent calendar is we're recommending you set a public hearing on possible changes to both Chapter 30 and 31 of the Code of Ordinances. You'll recall that the Charter Committee reviewed these 2 ordinances and recommended some minor changes to those, and they were discussed in one of your prior work sessions. Probably the most significant change is to incorporate the ethics policy into the ordinance so that it can more easily be found by board and commission members. And the attorney has offered 2 options in regard to that. One option is the ordinance amendment with all of the footnotes from the ethics policy, and one without it. The attorney feels the footnotes likely aren't needed, but we thought that you might feel some of those explanations might continue to be helpful. So we're recommending a public hearing be set on those ordinance changes for October 8th. The second item we're suggesting for public hearing on October 8th is the changes to the sidewalk snow removal ordinance. As we've talked about, this has been discussed multiple times over the last couple of years now, and 3 options kept rising to the surface as a way to increase the likelihood of having clear sidewalks throughout the city during the winter months. One of them was to contract for an outside firm to clear the 44 miles of residential sidewalks. And as you know, we sent out requests for proposals to obtain costs for doing that. No one responded to those proposals, and the feedback that we heard was it was due to the high capital outlay that would be needed for equipment and the difficulty with getting on-call workers for such work. The other issue that was investigated was to have city staff clear all of the sidewalks, but again, we ran into the same issues that an outside firm would run into. So that left the third item, which would be an ordinance change, which has been drafted based on the feedback at your last work session. And that ordinance would essentially include the same requirements that exist for residential. Sorry, I have to get my notes on this one. Residential and industrial properties. Commercial and industrial properties as they currently exist. And then it would provide a requirement that residential households start clearing their sidewalks, but would have a longer time frame to do so. So a residential property would have 48 hours after the snow ceases. This ordinance change also uses the definitions from the General Property Tax Act to identify what's a commercial property, what's an industrial property, and what's a residential property, so that there's clarity on who falls in what categories. It also includes provisions for clearing sidewalks in those events of continuous snowfall, and it gives enforcement two options, one as a municipal civil infraction, or the option of providing notice, giving the property owner 24 hours to clear, and if it's not done, the city would do so, bill for the cost, and it could become a lien on the tax bill. The last provision that's in this ordinance would be that the enforcement for any residential properties would not begin until November of 2019. So that gives 1 year for both education of our residential properties as well as allowing opportunity for those properties to find alternatives for those instances where they're not physically able to clear the sidewalk themselves. And then the last thing I would mention was there was general agreement that if this ordinance is adopted, that the city staff would no longer clear the school routes, so that all sidewalks are the responsibility of the property owners that are adjacent to them. So as I indicated, all you're doing tonight is setting the public hearing for October 8th on those changes. The next item on your consent calendar is to continue the purchase buyback program for 11 of our trucks that we have in our motor pool program. And these trucks were up for renewal in November and December, and you'll recall that you approved 3 of them in August. With this purchase, we were able to, I guess I would call it, right-size our fleet again to make sure we get the correct number of F-150s and F-250s, because you'll recall in August we purchased more of the larger trucks than we had originally wanted, so this allows us to right-size that. So we're recommending you authorize the renewal of the contracts to include 10 F-150s and 1 F-250 truck for a total cost of $362,050, all of which would be paid back in 1 year when those vehicles are turned in, other than the title and processing fees. Then the next item on the consent calendar is to consider an application fee for fireworks permits. The City Commission passed an ordinance in 2012 which indicates that permit fees should be set for those instances where we have large firework displays in the city. Somehow we missed setting those fees, and it's been told to us we may be having an application come through the process. So based on our analysis of actual costs, according to our fee-setting policy, we're recommending that the permit fee be set at $65, and this is consistent with the permit fee for open burn permits, which we do have a resolution for. It also sets a standby fee of $196 per hour if it's determined that we need to have fire officers on standby during that event. This is a little bit more expensive than the open burn permits because it requires more firefighters to be present, because aerial fireworks have a larger fallout pattern than what a bonfire might have. And then the last item is approval of payrolls and warrants.
I see a motion from Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Joseph. Comments from Commissioner Gillis?
Yeah, forgive me, I had a question on the snow removal. When we put out the bid, if I remember, we asked the bid for 4 inches or more of snow removal.
Correct.
Would they come in and clear the CD3 and the CD3L?
Correct.
And we didn't get any bids, and the thought was because there wouldn't be enough times that we'd be using them to be guaranteed that it was 4 inches or more. If it was a 3-inch snowfall, we wouldn't call them in, right?
That isn't the concerns we heard from the bidders. Their concerns were more so the capital investment they would have to make no matter how many times they came out, and the ability to have the on-call workers. But they didn't make comments about it being 4 inches necessarily.
Okay. So the bid went out for 4 inches to be cleared, but the ordinance is written, the residents would have to clear it even at a dusting.
Correct.
Okay. So the standards would be different for what we put out for bid, clearing it at 4, and then turn to where we're asking the residents to clear them no matter how many inches, even if it was a dusting.
Right, because that's what the current ordinance requires of commercial and industrial properties, is they have to clear it each snowfall.
Well, my concerns were, I wonder it was, even if it was a dusting or, you know, where they would think there would be more times that they would actually be put to work if it wouldn't have encouraged more bids rather than saying, we're only going to need you when it's 4 inches or more, because now we're asking the residents to do it no matter what. So just a thought I'd put out there. Sorry I didn't pull it off the consent calendar, so.
Okay. Commissioner Kulik.
Question for John. You'd be using different, if city staff was doing it, you would be using different equipment for a dusting than you would be for 4 inches probably, correct?
That's true. And vendors would do the same, if it was
Right.
contract, that would be the same thing.
Commissioner Joseph has his hand up.
Yeah, I just had just want to comment on the master plan. I was on the RFP committee, and McKenna and Waitrim were the two firms that we sent to the Planning Commission to really consider, and I'm really happy with the McKenna choice. They've got a strong plan to work with MDOT. We got examples of their final product, and it looked really professional, easy to use, and we figured that we would get a good value for the cost. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for serving on that committee on behalf of the commission. And Commissioner Ling, I believe you had a question or comment as well.
I just as a follow-up to what Commissioner Joseph said, I'd also like to thank the Planning Commission and the planner for the work that was involved in researching and then looking at the two firms that put in proposals, having a special meeting, and as you can tell just from the proposal we got, which was almost 100 pages, it's quite a lot of work involved in it. And I think that they have come up with a firm that looks like it's going to do a good job, but I know there was a lot of work involved in it, both in the initial putting together the proposal and then in making a recommendation. And then secondly, I just wanted to comment that even though it's on the consent agenda, as you can tell from the mini debate we've already had, the issue of snow removal is a big issue. And there are a number of different approaches that we can take to it, and there's a lot of opinions on it. And so I really hope that people will let us know whether they come to the public hearing or send an email or a note. I, for one, am very interested in hearing, after all this time, what does the community think is the best thing to do in terms of making sure that the sidewalks are clear.
Yeah, and city manager and vice mayor and I had a little conversation about this, and we're hoping for some feedback from the commissioners on if you feel like you're going to want a work session scheduled so that we can kind of work it in. We have a very tight work session schedule coming up here, so kind of seeing what we might think, or if we want to wait until we hear the public comment and then make a decision. If and when you know kind of which way you want to go, if you want to let us know, that way we can try to figure out how we can take care of all the important things we have coming up. So appreciate that. All right, seeing no other comments and questions on consent calendar items, I would ask all those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, consent calendar passes. On to item number 10, which is our public hearing. I will ask the city manager to give us a little bit of background information before we open the public hearing.
Yes, the public hearing is on a request for a tax abatement for an approximately 5,000 or 6,000 square foot addition to the American Mitsuba Corporation building at Three Leaves Drive. American Mitsuba is competing for an additional line to come to their plant, which would require them to add on to their building. Our guidelines indicate that approval of this type of a tax abatement under Public Act 198 is dependent on the jobs created, and the request is for a 50% abatement of the tax rate. The expected expansion is expected to have a value of approximately $900,000, and at a full tax rate, it would generate $28,000 across all taxing jurisdictions. So at a 50% abatement, which is allowed under this public law, the revenue generated across all taxing jurisdictions would be $14,000. American Mitsuba is working with the state of Michigan on additional assistance with the personal property acquisition to bring this line to Mount Pleasant. As you know, the state generally will not participate with assistance unless the local government has participated. It's expected that this expansion will create 32 full-time jobs. This personal property that will be purchased for the line is eligible for the manufacturing equipment tax exemption under the current personal property tax law. So what happens with that is the state collects an essential services tax that covers our proportion of the public safety and police and fire millages and remits those funds to the city. The state really doesn't consider abatements of personal property any longer because it's exempt other than the essential services tax. Mr. McBride of Middle Michigan Development Corporation contacted us today, and he had every intention of being in attendance tonight to speak in favor for your approval of this tax abatement, but was called out of town unexpectedly for a meeting that he had to attend. So after holding the public hearing, we would ask you to consider the resolution approving the request for the real property tax abatement at 50% for 12 years.
Okay. I will now open the public hearing on this item. If you are here and have any comments regarding this tax abatement, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes and again, state your name and address. Seeing, oh.
Good evening, my name is David Martin Stevens, 5146 Bridle Lane. I serve the associates and all the stakeholders, including you, of Mitsuba in North America as Senior Vice President. And this is Jeff Jocks, we call him JJ. Good evening. He's our newest plant manager. Address? What's your address?
8175 East Tamarack.
I think you get a good summary for that. We greatly appreciate the support of the city. In the past 30-plus years, we appreciate the mayor being with us at our anniversary this August, reading proclamation. We've invested many millions of dollars in this community. Obviously, the structure has changed with personal property tax, but we're excited about this possibility. We're working very hard to bring this business to Mount Pleasant instead of our Kentucky plant. I have a little mixed responsibilities as a corporate officer, but I'd like JJ just give you a quick thumbnail sketch of what we're doing because we don't toot our horn too much.
I do have a quick summary for you. So good evening, my name is Jeff Jacques again. I'm the plant manager at American Mitsuba. So it's our goal at American Mitsuba to continue business and add new jobs to our Mount Pleasant plant. This means we need to invest a lot of money in special equipment required to meet the needs of our customers. In this case, it also means, in addition to our building, to safely place a new press for metal forming as necessary. We anticipate between 25 to 35 new jobs over the next 3 years, and every incentive helps us to make this possible. Thank you for your consideration and support of our tax request.
Thank you. Commissioner Kulik.
Just have one question. Assuming that we pass the tax abatement and everything, when will you know that you're actually going to be breaking ground in Mount Pleasant?
I would estimate in the next 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Joseph.
I have a question. The Act 198 is contingent upon creation of new jobs, and you said that you're expecting somewhere from 25 to 35 new jobs.
We think
Correct.
that's a realistic estimate. Right now, there's a couple of different businesses that are hinging on this new equipment, and from what we expect to have, it'll probably be the higher number.
How do you define a new job?
A new job is a job that wouldn't exist without this investment.
But is that a full-time employment?
Yes, full-time employment. Okay. Right now, we have 250 direct manufacturing people that are full-time in this plant. We have 30 AMC level, which is corporate level people that work full-time in the plant, and then we hire between 80 and 100 per day contract employees or temporary employees on top of that for about 380 people on a given day.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is there anyone else here who has any comments regarding this tax abatement this evening? Seeing no one, I will close the public comment period. Look for a motion from Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve the tax abatement. abatement as presented.
Seconded by Commissioner Ling. I was just looking to see, I think we need to approve a resolution, correct? Yeah.
And approve the resolution.
Any comments or questions this evening? Commissioner Gillis.
Yes. I appreciate you bringing your company here to Mount Pleasant many years ago, and I also appreciate you expanding your manufacturing capabilities. I also value that you're bringing new job opportunities to our community, so thank you. With the tax abatement of only $14,000, what we were given in our packet, taxes were approximately $28,000, and you're asking for half of that. So you'll be paying $14,000, and we will be giving the tax abatement of $14,000. I can feel more comfortable with this tax abatement because you invested in us so many years ago. I just ask you to please also invest in your employees. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Lang.
I just want to ask one additional follow-up questions to the ones that I had asked earlier on the personal property tax. I can understand why you were having difficulty answering it, because I keep forgetting that essentially the company itself no longer pays personal property tax, right? That was eliminated, and presumably the state is replacing the loss to the communities from that with the essential services assessment.
Yes, but the state doesn't replace all of our
Right.
property tax, just the amount for public safety.
Right, but the question that I have, because I think I was never really completely clear on it right from the beginning of when the state was doing this, is that includes any, as in this case, it was approximately a $12 million personal property that is being added to the plant. That is added to figuring how much is owed to the city in terms of the essential services assessment?
Yeah, I'm assuming this personal property will satisfy the definition of exempt manufacturing. It's a pretty complex analysis, but I'm assuming it will. So yes, that would add to the essential services tax that we receive from the state.
Right, and I understand it's difficult for us to know, given the fact the state figures it out as they go, but presumably that should be, I would think, at least a fairly significant amount of revenue that the state would get. That's a fairly significant amount of personal property that's being added.
It is, the challenge with it is the state nets new with stuff that's depreciated and stuff that came off, and I can't even begin to explain the formula to you, so that's why I would be hesitant to estimate what it could be. In theory, you're right, it should, but I just don't trust the formula.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity at the 30th anniversary to tour the facility, and I asked one of my neighbors who happens to work there how many hours it took to clean the facility up to have it ready for this open house, and he said, "This is what it looks like every day." And it was amazing. It was really happy to be able to go through that facility and happy to be able to vote on this and look forward to hearing some good news in 30 days. So. With that, all those who support this motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you so much.
I would just echo, Mayor, the facility always is in pristine condition. I've toured it a number of times, and I'm sure Mr. Stevens would be happy to set up a tour again for any city commissioners that want to go through that. It's a very impressive facility. If you want to do that, let me know and we can make arrangements.
Can't wait to hear when we're going to break ground. All right, on to item 11B, airport snow removal.
Let me go back to my notes, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
So for airport snow removal, we bid this contract every 3 years. And this year, Pat McGurk Excavating was the sole bidder for the snow removal cost, and his bid holds last year's prices and holds those for the next 3 years on a per unit basis. So we're recommending approval of the contract with Pat McGurk Excavating for the next 3 snow seasons at a not to exceed cost of $18,500 per snow season. As some of you who have been around for a while will recall, some snow seasons are worse than others. So we monitor that not to exceed cost pretty closely. And if it looks like we may be exceeding it, we bring it back to you for an amendment before we expend the money. So based on history, we think $18,500 is likely enough for the next 3 years. But I think once out of the last 3 years, we had to bring it back to you for an amendment. And if we have a bad snow season, we'll bring it back to you before that occurs.
Do I see a motion? Motion by Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Joseph. Any comments or questions this evening? Commissioner Gillis.
Yeah, my question was just that, because I remember we always have amendments when it comes in the middle of the winter. We're always actually putting more money into that budget. But it costs $265 an hour to clear our airport runways, because it's $135 for road grader and operator and $130 an hour for loader and operator.
It depends on the kind of snow we have, whether we need both pieces of equipment or not. Sometimes only one piece of equipment is needed.
There has been occasions where there's been 3 or 4 loaders.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what it takes, the least amount it takes to get it done.
So that's picking up the snow, putting it in a dump truck, or a
Picking up, they have to move it out beyond the lights, and that's what they do, just clear the runway.
Okay.
And the taxiways and so on.
Thanks for that clarification, Mr. Zhang.
Watching snow be cleared in the city is always a fascinating thing. So I still would love to do a ride along on one of those days. So usually nights. But all right. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is passed. On to item number 12, consider setting priorities for the fall 2018 Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribal 2% funding request from city departments. City Manager.
You received the departmental requests in your packets 2 weeks ago, and there's an additional one in your packet this evening from the Mount Pleasant Housing Commission for an apprenticeship program that was not in the packet 2 weeks ago. So there's 2 items we need from you this evening. The first one is to receive concurrence on the priority level that is set for each project before we submit it to the tribal council, and we've summarized those on your summary list. And the second thing is for each of you to indicate your top 5 priorities so that we can accumulate those responses and share that information with the tribal council before they make funding recommendations, or decisions, I should say. They make decisions, not recommendations.
They do make decisions, and we did a round table recently with some city staff members and city manager and I, and learned a little bit more about how the process works. That it regularly will go to different departments at the tribe to have them kind of weigh in on the project itself before it goes to the tribal council to vote on. So, and they did say that they do take into account these priorities. Well, some of them said that they take these priorities into account and are kind of our internal rankings from city commissioners as to how they make decisions and what they're spending their money on. So, have the clerk go down, or do you want to?
I should have mentioned one thing that I forgot to mention. The request that was received from the Housing Commission, they weren't familiar with our priority definitions, so the priority level that they set for theirs is at a level of critical. But if you look at our definition, since it's a new program, it would more likely fall in the medium category. But I didn't feel comfortable unilaterally making that decision, so I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with changing that priority level on at least that one, and then see if you had any changes to any other ones.
My brain is hazy on how we did this last time. Do you want the clerk to go down the roll, or you want me to ask them? Or what would you like me to do?
For the low, medium, high critical, you just ask if anybody had any concerns with what was on the summary, was the first thing we did.
Okay. Does anyone have any? Commissioner Gillis has a comment, I can tell already.
Yeah. You know me, right? Yes, I'd like to change the Housing Commission's application for $412,000 for an apprenticeship program, maintenance apprenticeship program to medium. And I'd also like to ask, because I was under the understanding the Housing Commission was separate from the city and that they did all their budgets and we didn't put general fund money into that. So why would their application be alongside all of the city's needs?
The Housing Commission is a separate independent entity, but they're created by the city. They wouldn't exist if the city hadn't created them. So that going through the city is their only mechanism for requesting 2% funds. They can't request it on their own. And they do not receive any general fund money from the city. They are totally self-supporting from their rents and the grants and so forth that they get. This is just another grant process that they are eligible for since they're an independent arm of the city.
And the request was for $412,000
Correct.
for an apprenticeship program.
Do you feel comfortable with the other priority settings? I see mostly nods in agreement. Okay.
Is everybody comfortable with changing that one to a medium?
Yes.
So, I will say there was I believe it was last spring, where the homeless shelter received a grant through the school district, I believe it was, in partnership. So it's not uncommon for that sort of working through a different entity to occur, but it is unusual, I think, here. So going down then, do you want me to ask them? You want to ask them? I will start at the end, I guess. Commissioner Lalonde, do you want to give me your top 5?
Peak, airport operations funding, Mount Pleasant Center archaeological surveys, the Mission Dam, and stormwater study.
Stormwater studies under which one? That the
Public
Works.
Is multi-jurisdictional stormwater study, right above the brush chipping.
Yeah, just as long as you're slow, so I can. There's a bunch of them this time. So getting the tick marks is a little hard sometimes.
Need to like number them or something. Commissioner Gillis.
My number 1 choice is the no-fee brush chipping for $30,000. It's a high priority, and that's gone off really well in the community. So, number 2 is the 1 meg drinking water reservoir bypass for $250,000. It's a critical. Number 3 is the chemical feed system for $350,000. That's also critical. Number 4 is the self-contained breathing apparatus for $178,835, and that's a high. And number 5 is the East Digester rehabilitation for $279,500, and that's also a high priority.
Okay. That one. And Commissioner Joseph.
Okay. My 5 in really no particular order. Start with the East Digester rehabilitation, our PEAK program, the 1 million gallon drinking water reservoir bypass, Mission Creek dam removal, and the chemical feed system.
Commissioner, okay. Oh wait, all right, okay, Commissioner Lang.
Yeah, in my order of priority, the archaeological survey, the PEAK program, the multi-jurisdictional stormwater study, the Crapo Street storm sewer extension for community mental health, and the no-fee brush chipping.
I'm just looking for the Crapo one.
It's in Public Works.
It's the really long one.
Yep.
Commissioner Kulik.
The census, the archaeological study, survey, PEAK, Mission Dam removal, and the 1 million gallon bypass.
Vice Mayor Madeye.
I have archaeological surveys, peak, bayonet, no-fee brush chipping, and multi-jurisdictional stormwater study.
Got it. And I had the archaeological survey, the stormwater study, the sub-pump disconnect program, can't read my own writing, the dam removal, and then the Crapo Street program, storm sewer extension.
Okay.
I have one thing I have to look up. I just noticed something, so if you can give me 1 second, I want to
We'll
double
give
check
you
something.
All the seconds. I noticed you were scrambling for something,
Yeah,
so.
something jumped out at me, and I just want to make sure we're all set before we wrap this up.
I'll just mention that I know it takes a lot of work and energy to put these grant requests together, so I'll just thank the city staff members for taking the time and energy to put these together and coming up with creative funding sources to take care of our needs. And thank you to the tribe for, encouraging and continuing. I know their agreement with the state that provides for the 2% funding. This has been a non-negotiable, is providing that money back to the community has been one of their non-negotiables when bargaining with the state with how that treaty will continue to look. And they currently don't actually have a pact that requires them to continue that giving process, but they still are continuing to give it, and they're very committed to that and to the local communities. So thank the tribe for that opportunity.
I found the thing I was concerned about. One of the things that I noticed on the summary is the Bay Area Narcotics Enforcement Team has a priority level on your summary of L for low. And that didn't look right to me, so I just was pulling up the application, and that really should be a C for critical, because that's an ongoing program that is somewhat dependent on these funding sources. So that priority level should be a C if you're okay with me making that change on the summary.
I think that's a good catch.
If that's the case, I'll change my million-gallon bypass to bayonet.
And that was going to be my next question, to apologize and see if that made any changes to any other priorities. I apologize, we didn't notice that before it went out.
We are all human. Commissioner Joseph.
I'm not going to change any of my priorities, but I would say that all the things that are come to our attention are very high priority.
They are.
Right. That's one of the feedback I gave the tribe at the roundtable discussion, was that we have a number of programs that are ongoing, like Bayonet and Peak and the airport operations, that we really depend on the funding and support from the tribe to continue those programs, but it's hard to balance those continuing programs with the one-off programs that we'd like to do once in a while, or we need to do, but we don't have the funds always to provide for that. And how do we balance that when we're considering those goal setting and the priority setting on these? So we, mentioned that to the tribe, and they hadn't really thought about that piece, but said that they will try to see how they can incorporate that for future funding requests. So.
I'm done now.
Okay. Thank you for catching that. We appreciate it. All right, on to item number 16. Considering a resolution for setting a deadline date for medical marijuana facility licensing application.
The commission will remember when these ordinances were first drafted in late spring or early summer, we originally had a due date for when the facility licenses applications would be due for those situations where we had limited numbers. But because of the uncertainty about how the state process was going to work at that time, we decided to delay the decision about when that initial application period would close until we had more experience with the process. So the ordinance was drafted to indicate that a resolution would be passed prior to October 1, which would set the ending date of the initial application period. In your last work session, we provided data about the number of Phase 1 pre-qualifications that had been approved by the state, the scheduled meetings of the licensing board that are scheduled to occur yet this year, and our understanding of the number of applications that are in the queue. And based on the language in the ordinance, the number of approvals was the primary consideration. Our discussion has been on how to balance allowing enough time for businesses to make it through the queue with access to patients. Most patients do have access through the caregiver model, which is still in place, but that may not meet all patients' needs. So based on the discussion at the last work session, we've drafted the resolution to indicate a window date through February 1st of 2019 for that initial application period. There's various models across the state that have different timelines, different limits on licenses, and some are even changing their application periods based on what we learned last week. But we've drafted the resolution for your consideration with the February 1 date for the grower licenses and the provisioning centers, which are the only two licenses that have limits on the numbers.
Okay, I see a motion from Commissioner Kulik.
I move the resolution as presented in the packet.
Okay, and is that a second from Commissioner Gillis? Okay, comments and questions? Commissioner Ling?
I do have a question about the suggestion that was brought to our attention about the possibility of having one closing date for dispensaries and a different closing date for growers. And I just wondered if the staff has any response to that, if it would create any kind of problem, if there's something about the way in which we're doing the system that would cause, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that we do it at this point, but I'm just wondering if there are any complications that might be involved in that.
I can't readily think of any other than we would need to be real clear with applicants about what date is what. We would have to notice two different potential lotteries and hold those lotteries separately. Yeah, Paul, those, can you think of anything else?
Know it. I just don't know if I would be concerned at what the goal was to get the number of people we so desired, or the board desired. I don't know if you're going to get that. If we go ahead and do the lottery for the provisioning centers in the other one. That was something that the commissioners, you guys essentially desired to get a bigger applicant pool. And by going ahead and doing that, I think that that's the first primary concern.
Thank you. I had one other question. You just made reference to, based on what we learned last week, that a number of communities have made some changes based on what we learned last week, and maybe it was in something that we got, but could you remind, was there something that we learned last week?
No, I'm sorry. We were at the Michigan Municipal League Convention last week, and Jacob and I and Bill all talked to, and Commissioner Joseph all talked to a number of communities when we were there, and some of the communities were indicating they were changing their deadline period because they weren't, because of the pre-qualifications that weren't occurring at the state level. So they were having discussions about extending their deadline period longer than what they had originally set. And they were just, those who had been through it, through the application process, have been amending their ordinances as they learned from it. So there's just a lot of activity going on across the state as we talk to different communities.
Commissioner Joseph.
Nancy, could you clarify for me, if we get to the end of an application deadline and for any reason we still have licenses that are available, does then it become like a first come, first serve basis?
I don't believe the way it's written it does. I think we give conditional licenses to those that we've received by the deadline, if they're under the numbers. And then I think that we start accepting applications for a second window, and we would have to set a new window of when those applications would be accepted and when they would be due. So we would conditionally approve everybody who applies by February 1st, and if we're under the limits, then at that point in time, we would set a new window for the next period.
Commissioner Lalonde.
I think there was a good point that was brought up by Mr. Fakuri, who wrote to us talking about the size of the pool in relation to how many licenses we're actually giving out, because it feels like if there's a huge difference between having 100 people in our potential pool or having 300 people in our potential pool, seems pretty very little difference when we're only giving out 3 provisioning center licenses and a handful of growing licenses. So I would be in support of shortening the period, because I can see where it'd be a really big pain to business owners having to keep extending the rents on property they don't even know if they need to have or not for another couple more months. So I'd entertain the possibility of having a shorter period.
Commissioner Lang.
I'm going to suggest an amendment to the resolution for discussion. I'd like to move that we amend the resolution that we're passing setting the date to a date of December 14th, Friday, December 14th, 2018.
Commissioner Joseph.
Second that amendment.
Commissioner Lang.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of this information on why I was looking at that date. I mean, I did read some of the material that we've gotten. I know that when we had our discussion, there were a lot of questions about how to set the date. And in the discussion that we just had about the conversations going on in other communities suggest nobody's quite sure what's going to happen and how to set the date. The reason I was looking at possibly a December 14th date is because when I look back at the material from our work session, it did give the dates for the additional meetings of the state board. And between October 1st and December 14th, there will be 3 more meetings. And at the rate at which they are approving them, I mean, as we looked at how many have been approved at each of the meetings, they have increased the number that they have approved. I believe that when we had our work session, the indication was that we thought maybe in September there had been maybe 25 or 30 that had been approved. We don't know what they are, whether dispensaries, growers, but at that rate, with 3 more meetings, there's the possibility there would be another 75 that would be approved. If we wait until February 1st, there's still only 1 more meeting of the board in January. So from that perspective, it seems to me we will have theoretically, we will have a significantly larger pool. And it's only moving it up 6 weeks, but it does allow the business, the people involved in this, getting the applications, to have a indication before the end of the year whether or not they're going to get it. So and it seems to me there's probably some advantages to that. And as we've just been having in this discussion, if we don't end up with enough, we do have the ability to then set another deadline date, which we perhaps could even make February 1st if we decided. So it seems to me, I think there's arguments on both sides. When we had the work session, we said there isn't any magic number. We're just trying to kind of figure out what's the best way to do it. And it just seems to me that making it the middle of December is a reasonable compromise. So that's, I know we didn't have much discussion about that particular date, but that was the reason why I was proposing that.
Do you have any?
I guess just two comments based on that. We didn't have a chance to talk about this at staff, so I'm not sure what reactions they might have. But the first comment I would have is we don't know what the 2019 schedule is for Lara. Right. We know through December, but we don't even know if they're going to have a January meeting or not. But my second comment I think is more substantive, is that when someone applies to us, they have to submit a copy of the official paperwork from Lara saying they've been approved. Mm-hmm. So my concern with a date of December 14th is Lara has a meeting on December 6th. Mm-hmm. I don't have any idea how long it takes them to get paperwork to somebody to say they've been officially approved, mm-hmm. to know if those December approvals is enough time for them to apply in a week. I just don't have any concept how quickly they get those out. Mm-hmm. What they went through in May is different than what they went through now, so I don't know.
If we were to set that tonight, and then we were to determine that it would be, that's too short of a period of time from December, would we have the option of extending it maybe to the end of December? I mean, I guess all I'm really saying is, once we set the date tonight, if there are some paperwork problems, would it be possible for us to change it at a subsequent meeting between now and December?
I believe we talked about that at the work session when the attorney was here, and she said certainly legally you have the ability to make that change, but the concern was what that does to business owners and the people who have options and those kinds of things. If we keep moving the target on them, it just makes it more difficult for them to make their business plan. So I don't know what kind of impact that would have if you changed it again.
Commissioner Kulik?
I'll be voting against the proposed change. Recreational marijuana will be on the November ballot statewide. Everything I've seen so far projects that it will pass. Why would I want to go get medical marijuana when I can go get fun marijuana starting next year, assuming the city opts in? So I'm comfortable with the February date as originally proposed.
Commissioner Gillis?
There's been a lot of discussion about when the application window should close. I think more applicants in our lottery system, since there is a lottery system, is a better thing. There are 600 people, applicants, waiting to get through the LARA's Phase 1. So far since May, they've gone through 56 out of all those other applicants that are out there. I think it's very unfair that we're trying to close the window before Lara even gets to see the application. Not that they've asked for more information, not that they've been denied, they haven't even been able to get a hearing date to get through the Phase 1. And now we want to do this in 2 months' time to end our application. I've always been an advocate for allowing people within our community to start these businesses. We had someone here that is from Detroit that's already been through Phase 1, and which is obviously looking here in Mount Pleasant. But I think a larger applicant pool would be the most fairest way to not only our community members that might want to get involved in this industry that have been a caregiver to the medical marijuana patients. There is no rush about patients aren't going to get their medicines because they're already getting their medicines. They're already getting their medicines currently. We started this back in 2017 in April. So I don't think 2 more months added on to December 15th through February 1st, but allows, because who knows, Lara has canceled meetings before on a month. So they might not even meet in December because it's a holiday month. So I feel very uncomfortable saying that we're now going to limit the window of opportunity for not only our local community members to take into this industry, knowing that there are 600 applications in the queue that have not even been looked at. And I've said this before, I think more fish in the sea make a better pond. I would rather have 600 people in our lottery in February 1st than other than the few people, maybe the 56 that have already been through that process. And I'll mention, every one of those applicants that have already been through phase one, they can set up shop in every community that's opting in. So those 56 people are very lucky people because they can set up a marijuana business in every community that's opted in. So they have the golden Willy Wonka ticket. They will be millionaires. And I think we need to spread some of that industry money, lucrative money around.
Vice Mayor Mattei.
And in setting the, I mean, with the original proposal and setting this at February 1st, there's with this particular provision, and as with, many of the other provisions that we've discussed in the whole medical marijuana facilities ordinance, everything is meant to align with some degree of balance, as to the particular issue that's at hand. And so with this one, as it's clear on the one side there's the concern that the period is too short and you won't have a large enough pool, and the other side being that it's too long and you're delaying the implementation of this process of the for these particular facilities far out too far. And so I think that at this point I'm comfortable with the February 1st 2019 date. I think that's appropriate enough middle point to balance those two extremes of that I just had suggested it just a moment ago. So I think I'll be supporting leaving it where it was at this point.
Other comments, or Commissioner Joseph?
I would say that I like the amendment by Commissioner Ling because no matter how long we open this window for, it's a lottery system and there's only a limited number of licenses. And so if our goal is to get local people a chance to get into our community and open the business here, we've sort of already given up on that idea in a way, because there's no formal vetting system. It's not saying, John Smith from Shepherd, we like you because you live 5 miles down the road, we're going to pick your application. It's a completely random lottery, and even if 100 people are in that lottery, their chances of getting picked are very small. And I can understand the concerns of maybe a business owner saying, I've gone through phase one and I'm trying to get a building and try to secure a business, and the longer I wait, the more my costs go up, and there's no real guarantee of ever really opening that business. So I was sort of moved by the public comments that we've received, and I really think that shortening the window is more fair, because either way, eventually, our medical marijuana patients are going to get access, and I don't know if I see the benefit of waiting.
One more last comment, please.
Yes, ma'am.
In all our bids, we prefer local preference over out-of-town businesses or services. That's actually our policy for local preference. I worked at the ad hoc committee all last year from May 2017 until now, and have always been in favor of local people serving our local marijuana patients. We don't know how many local people have even been able to get through phase one. I know of many outside of our local community, Detroit, Grand Rapids, that have been through phase one. And like I say again, they all can open anywhere in each community, and I'd like to give our local people an opportunity.
All right, seeing no other comments or questions, we'll take a vote on the amendment, which is to change the date of the deadline to December 14th at 5 o'clock.
4:30 it would have to
4:30, just kidding. That's exactly what I said, was 4:30. All right, so 4:30 on December 14th. All those in favor of that amendment, say aye and show your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Nay. All right, so that amendment dies on the floor. Are there any comments or questions on the original motion? Seeing none, I will ask that all those in favor of a February 1st date at 4:30 deadline for the applications to say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, that passes 6-1. All right. What a fun night. Okay, any announcements on city-related issues and new business from the commissioners? Commissioner Kulik.
The Morning Sun had an article this week about Jim McBride being selected to a state board of economic developers, and I think that's a feather in our cap as a community and all the hard work that Jim done for us. So I'd like to tell him congratulations on his appointment. And I'd like to remind everybody out there in TV land that there is a new state amendment, I guess, to the traffic code that requires when you're passing a bicycle that you must give 3 feet of clear space for passage. That means don't crowd the bicycles, folks.
Any other announcements or comments from the commissioners or staff? Commissioner Gillis, do we have any vacancies on our boards and commissions? Do you know?
I think it's just the historic district at this point, right?
We have one on the EDC that we just
as well.
received now.
And you can find those applications at mountpleasant.org under boards and commissions, and you just put in your application, or there might be other things you might be interested in, because we have turnover quite a bit. So just because we're only mentioning a couple that have vacancies, please, if there's anything else you're interested in, please put your application in and join us. And I want to say what a great thing it was to see all the brush piles all at one time all over the city. And we're going to be able to pick them up all at once rather than constantly throughout the summer. I'm hoping it made it a little bit easier on our Public Works Department that they can get all those people. I know there was 150 that signed up. So I want to thank Mr. Zhang again for putting in that 2% request last year, and also the tribe for funding it, and also everyone that took advantage of that. We're going to make Mount Pleasant look great. Thank you.
Commissioner Joseph.
I just wanted to make the comment, this past week, the League of Women Voters, if you're not familiar, they're a nonpartisan organization that advocates education for people who are going to vote. They had a forum here in this building for the City Commission and I think the school board. And they have another one coming up this week on Thursday? On Thursday for the 99th House seat and County Commission. And if you can't make it, you can also watch it online. And I'm not running for election this year, so I feel really comfortable advocating that you should go out and say, you know, at least watch it, be informed, know what your local elected officials stand for, and just remember to vote.
And do we know when the ballots will be in here at City Hall? We have them?
We have the majority of them, correct, yes.
We're not ready for people to vote yet.
No, we're still waiting on, the printer had some issues with one precinct that we're still waiting on.
Okay, but
So we are
soon.
working on getting them put together, the ones we do have for AV.
Perfect. So soon we'll have them here, and you can always stop into City Hall and just vote if you're eligible for absentee ballots once we have
You can
those.
fill out your application for absentee ballot now, and then
Yes,
it'd be,
applications can be turned in anytime.
thank you.
All right. You have a question, comment?
Yes, I had one thing.
Announcement.
The mayor and I met with the president of the SGA last week and talked about the possibility of holding a special city commission meeting on campus in conjunction with an SGA meeting. And so the date that SGA would like us to look at is Monday, October 29th. So if you could either let me know this evening or give me a call tomorrow to let me know your availability of that, so we can firm that up with the president and start putting that agenda together, I would appreciate it.
I can do it.
All right.
Question.
Yeah.
So isn't our regular meeting on the 22nd?
Yes.
Yeah,
This would be a
an
special
additional
meeting.
Special meeting.
Can we just cancel the one on the 22nd and just do it on the 29th?
Too many things on the agenda. We talked about combining our regular meeting with theirs, but we need to keep this agenda to about an hour and 15 minutes with them because they have to go into their committees. Because they have their meetings every Monday night at 7 o'clock as well. So to combine, it made more sense to be able to do a joint meeting and kind of have a combined agenda. Commissioner Joseph.
I'd just like to add that I'm a former member of the Student Government Association, and I think it's a really great opportunity for us to just to work together, to be involved together. There's a lot of good students over there who are civically minded, and I know the last couple of years they've held a local candidates forum for city commissioners, county commissioners, all sorts of local races, and hopefully they hold that this year as well. So looking forward to working with them.
All right. With that, I will open up the last opportunity for public comment that we have this evening. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to come and speak anything city related. We ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes and give us your name and address.
Hello, my name is Andrew Zarowski. Address is 1528 South Mission Street. I'm the City Commission liaison for the Student Government Association. I just wanted to come introduce myself to the commission today. A little bit about me. I am a fifth-year senior studying political science, and I'm happy to be serving as the liaison for the student body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Erin Zimmer. I live at 517 East Grand Avenue, and I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself as a candidate for County Commission in Mount Pleasant in the 6th District. I've had the opportunity to know some of you for a long time, and some of you I've just recently met, but I hope to have the opportunity to develop a good working relationship with all of you in the near future. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Petro Tolis, 306 East Broadway Street, Mount Pleasant. Got a quick few points to make. One, going back to the snow removal on sidewalks and ice removal. The Morning Sun was quoted one of the commissioners here, it was maybe about a month ago, maybe more than that the city would have to expend money to buy equipment. That is incorrect. The city has 2 Unimogs, last time I was over there, that are designed just for the purpose of doing sidewalks that cost around $150,000 per unit. That's why you had no contractors bidding the sidewalks out. Number one, for the cost of that, and the city already has it, we have on an average of 13 to 15 snowfalls a year. All you'd have to do is put 2 employees in there and do them. When I first moved here in the 60s, that was part of your taxes, and that's why they had that equipment. They had at least one of them I know back then that did all the city sidewalks. Now we're saying, well, we're not going to do the residential sidewalks anymore, and now we're going to cut the school zones out and have the landowners do it. This is just ridiculous. It really is. And now we had a 32% increase downtown for snow and ice removal. And now we're not doing it at 2 inches, we're doing it at 4 inches. I'm a snowplow contractor, one of the businesses I own. I've been in the business since the 70s. And that winds up costing the taxpayers way more money, because you're creating an ice pack when you're not plowing it at 2 inches and waiting until 4 inches. Then it freezes and thaws every night at 7 o'clock and refreezes up. So now you're trying to make the streets safe again, and you're expending sand and salt, which salt just went up $35 a ton because there's a shortage, and they're limiting every contractor now on how much they can get. This just doesn't make sense. You're not thinking it out, and then you're trying to put something on elderly people, handicapped people, and taxpayers to do this when it's not even their property. The city owns it. The second item that I want to bring up is this master plan. We're spending $150,000 to update our plan. And then what are we going to do in 2023 or 24 when we're mandated to review that again? You're going to spend another $150,000? You ought to have city staff doing the upgrades on that. And this bidding process, I just can't understand it. I've been in the contracting business for 35 years. You bid the airport out at a 3-year bid at $18,500. If I bid something out for 3 years, I'm going to take in consideration there's going to be 13 or 15 snowfalls. I'm going to have to bid it a little bit higher. And then if anything goes over or under, I have to eat it. But you're telling me, oh no, we're going to have an amendment here, and then I can go back as a contractor and come back to the city and say, well, no, I need more money now. I don't understand that process at all. Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening that has any comments for the City Commission? Seeing none, I will close this opportunity for public comment. And we're going to have a short recess before we go into our presentation. Yes. Okay. So we will have a short recess, and we'll come back here to this space, and Chris Saladin will give us a presentation on our operating budget for 2019, and then we will recess again to go upstairs to continue our work session.
had for a budget presentation in a long time, so this is great.
All right, I will call us back into work session. We had 2 items this evening scheduled for work session topics. One was the presentation on the operating budget, and the other is discussion on a potential property maintenance standard ordinance. And getting that it is kind of late already, and we've had a lot of large topics this evening and a lot of good discussion, I would like to suggest that we postpone the second topic, the property maintenance standards, for a later work session, and kind of see what we can do to add that into the later schedule.
We've already had the property maintenance vetted by neighborhood groups and whatnot. Why don't we just put it on the agenda, hear what the John Q. Public, Joe Sixpack at home thinks about it, and then if we need we need a work session after that, we can do it.
I believe from the discussion I had with the city manager that there are some pieces that they would like some information from us on before we get to a finalized version of a draft. No?
I don't know.
Okay. We will talk about it and figure out the best way to make progress on these items. So if that is okay with everyone, we will ask the gentlemen who are here this evening to help us with that piece to go home and see their families. Yep. All right. Commissioner Joseph, do you have a question before we?
I was just going to make the motion that we move the work session that you were talking about.
I don't know if do we need a motion to remove it?
We're in work session, we can't make a motion.
Yeah, we can't make
That's
motions
right.
in work sessions.
And as long as you're in unanimous agreement about it, I think we're okay.
Yeah. But thank you.
Is anybody concerned about doing it?
Okay. All right. So with that, everyone has a drink and a cookie, and we are ready for a lively presentation on the budget.
Okay. Tonight's presentation is going to be a high-level overview of the 2019 proposed operating budget. The budget's really more than just a mandated collection of numbers, narratives, charts, etc. It's really a representation of the strategies that we want to use to improve our community and deliver services for our citizens. I'm going to start out talking big picture on the general fund and then provide you with some updates on some of the major items that have shaped our projections for 2019. First off, with the general fund, we're anticipating revenues of approximately $12.9 million. And as you can see from the graph, the largest chunks of those are coming from property taxes and state shared revenue. On the expenditure side of the general fund, we expect expenditures to be approximately $13 million. And as typical with general fund, which is mostly services provided to citizens, the bulk of those expenses fall on the compensation side of the pie graph. So bottom line overall, we need to use approximately $148,000 of our unassigned fund balance to balance the budget for 2019. This is, the City Commission has a policy that requires the unassigned fund balance to be at least 15% of expected expenditures. Even after using the $148,000 to balance the budget, we're still going to be north of 20% of expenditures in the unassigned fund balance, so we're in good shape there. Now I'd like to talk about some of the important items that have not changed very much from 2018, but still have a major impact on our budget. The first one is that we're anticipating essentially flat growth for state shared revenue and property taxes. This, sort of status quo, along with our lean staffing levels, means that we're constantly reevaluating priorities so we can meet the Commission's goals and deliver the best possible services to our citizens. This budget is also built on the state of Michigan's Act 51 projections that have allowed us to reallocate capital improvement millage to operations instead of having those contributions go towards street projects and sidewalk projects. Health insurance for 2017 plan experience and year-to-date 2018 trend. Basically, we're predicting the 2019 rates are going to stay flat, and we believe that this is primarily due to focus on preventative care and the work that has gone into our new prescription processor, our new insurance broker, as well as educating employees about cost-saving options. This is the third year in a row we've been able to hold the status quo on the rates, which, if you know anything about the marketplace and health rates, that's a really big deal. Moving on to our pension, based on the essentially status quo actuarial assumptions, along with good investment performance, pension costs are expected to remain relatively flat for 2019. We have made and continue to make all required contributions to both our MERS and our Act 345 pension systems. Additionally, over the past several years, we've made progress in cooperation with our unions and employee groups to reduce future pension and healthcare liabilities. So now that we've covered some of the major factors for 2019 that were similar to 2018, I want to talk about some of the things that have changed for the 2019 budget. One of the major changes that you'll see in the operating budget is we've removed the list that was sort of highlighted all of the strategic initiatives in support of the vision statements. We've changed the document to focus on the 3 primary goal priorities identified during the City Commission's last goal-setting process. City staff is still working on items that had been previously in the strategic initiatives, but since most of these items are also discussed elsewhere in the budget, we felt important to call out the new goals that will be targeted in 2019. Also worth noting, some of the strategic initiative activities that were highlighted in prior year budgets do not appear as they do not have a direct dollar impact, but just know that the staff is still continually working to improve our processes and operational efficiencies. Rates and fees. Per the City Commission approved policy guidelines, we've been systematically reviewing fees and charges for things like building inspections, site plan reviews, and field services provided by our water department staff. The primary focus has been on the services that are used most frequently and that have gone the longest without being analyzed to see if they're covering costs adequately. Speaking of rates, for the past 3 years, we've talked to you about the need to increase water and sewer rates as they'd gone several years without being increased. Based on updated fund balance, revenue, and capital improvement projections, we're recommending the following rates for 2019. Wastewater, no rate change. Water, $1.01 per month on the demand charge for the average single-family residence. As you can see from this chart that compares our water rates, including the proposed increase on water, to all of our neighboring communities, we have the cheapest rates while still providing quality water and environmentally friendly wastewater treatment services. Next, we're going to move on to open items, and these are items that will be discussed in one of the upcoming work sessions on the budget, and staff will be looking for additional City Commission input and feedback on these items. They include the fees. We need to know if the Commission supports the recommended fees as outlined on the fee schedule, which is Roman numeral page 16 in the budget book. Economic development contracts. This includes discussion of the LDFA and the Mid-Michigan Development Corporation. Capital funds. Should we make changes to where or how our capital improvement funds are used moving forward? Now we're going to talk about some of the unknown items that are out there. These have the potential to impact the 2019 budget, but we don't have enough information at this time to make an educated guess about their impact, so these are not included in the budget. First one is downtown. What is the proper mix of funding sources and at what level to support a successful downtown? Right now, the plan is for staff to work with the city commission at one of the upcoming work sessions, as well as staff to work with the various boards and stakeholders at one of the upcoming board meetings. Ballot initiatives. This is recreational marijuana and the minimum wage proposal. Since this budget was created, the state preemptively approved the minimum wage ballot. However, that occurred, there wasn't enough time to get those projections into this budget. Trash and recycling. Since this budget was completed, we've also received new bid pricing on solid waste pickup and disposal. Our bag tag rate is likely to increase for 2019. Staff is currently working on those new rates, and when we have those ready, we'll be bringing a recommendation to the commission. Additionally, due to recycling or conditions in the recycling markets overseas, pushing down demand and price for raw recycled material, that is going to impact the solid waste fund as well for 2019. The lead and copper service lead regulations. Basically, the state is requiring us to do an inventory of our service leads, and that's going to impact 2019, but we're not exactly sure how that's going to fall because a little bit of the timing is still up in the air on that.
Quick question, if you don't, sorry.
Sure.
You said the increase in bag and tag?
Correct.
But not increase in the recycling?
We don't have enough information to be able to predict a change.
Okay, thank you.
Impact to the water fund from PFAS testing and potential regulations that could result based on those test results. The DEQ is currently working its way through the state and testing water supplies. We're scheduled, Isabella County is actually scheduled to have all of its water supplies sampled the first 3 weeks of October. So, pending contracts, we have several of our larger and or long-term contracts that are either out for bid or going out to bid soon, and those will have an impact on 2019.
Those aren't labor contracts.
No, nope, that's like attorney,
Okay.
auditor, all those sorts of things. Good question. We're currently analyzing whether or not it makes sense to use funds over the next couple of years to rehab the offices at the Public Works Building, or if it makes more sense to use those funds to relocate DPW admin and engineering staff to City Hall to improve customer service. 410 West Broadway, there are sufficient funds in place to cover obligations for 2019, and if the proposed development occurs, there will be sufficient funding to cover all of the remaining payments. However, if the development does not occur, an alternate funding source will have to be identified after 2019. So next steps in the budget process, we have work sessions scheduled for October 8th, October 22nd, November 26th if necessary. We respectfully request that city commissioners have any of their questions to City Manager Ridley by October 12th. And we have a public hearing scheduled for November 12th. And then we are required to adopt a budget on or before the last City Commission meeting of 2018. That's it.
Commissioner Kulik.
You were talking about ballot initiatives, minimum wage. That really only affects our seasonal help and peak employees, right? Because everybody else is already making more than the proposed.
Yep. And or any interns that we have as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But one of the things we'll also need to analyze is as those minimum wages of our seasonal and temporary employees go up, is there enough gap or is there starting to be compression between some of our frontline workers and those? And we haven't completed that analysis yet either.
Well, and then you look at the increase in peak overall cost. Does that mean we need to raise the rates we charge there? So yeah, it's a circular thing.
Yes, it's a ripple effect.
Okay. Commissioner Joseph.
With the water increase, the dollar one, that's just a flat rate increase that you're projecting?
That's part of the fee schedule that's in the budget book. That dollar, yeah, it would be a flat rate, so it wouldn't change regardless of consumption.
It's because water has two components. There's the demand fee that's going to raise $1.01.
Yep.
And then your usage, if you use more than a certain amount, then you're paying more also.
Correct, and that rate is unchanged for 2019.
Commissioner Gillis.
On the 410 West Broadway, parcel B, we still have like $330,000.
I
Wasn't
believe
it?
that's close, but I don't have the number right at my fingertips.
And, yeah, not the taxpayer bond obligation, that's not coming off our taxes, but what, because there was no development there in 2005 like we were promised. And you said, so we have already allocated something for next year?
Correct. What's between what we started with for fund balance and projected revenue for that fund, we can cover what's in 2019, but beyond 2019, we can't cover the whole debt obligation.
And wasn't that debt obligation to be retired by like 2022?
Again, I would have to look at the chart.
It's either 2022 or 2023, one of those 2
I was
years.
thinking 23, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So the gap between 19 and either 2022 or 2023 is about $360,000 between what we owe and what the 0.5 millage will generate.
So it was like 5 years out, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kulik.
I'm always glad when we get to the end of the year at the budget and it's time to do the final budget adjustment that you guys are always, as long as I can remember dealing with city budgets, you guys there's always more money left in the bottom of buckets than you accounted for, so that the fund balance doesn't get hit necessarily as bad as you thought going into it. The problem I have is I don't have a problem, since our fund balance is so healthy, using the $148,000 to balance this year, but we can't keep getting the $148,000 a year, because that's eventually we're going to end up in a deficit situation. So I guess I'd like to see some sort of strategy to reduce the amount that we're going to be dipping into our fund balance to do future budgets with.
Yeah, and there's a number of factors that go into that strategy that are in place to do that. And each year we start to make some progress toward it. And part of what we have to remember is some of that $148,000 is for one-time expenditures that won't be repeated in 2020. So we also analyze that to see how much is really going to carry over. Okay. But you're right. We worked under the guidelines of when those revenues don't meet the expenses, we first look at using some of that excess fund balance. Then we look at, should we be looking at millage increase and or services? But this year, since, the other one that's in there is the capital improvement plan. So this plan still assumes the capital improvement millage is at 1.5 mils. And so those first two tiers stayed the same, and we were able to do it this year again. And we keep trying to avoid to go to that third tier if we don't have to, by the things that we've been talking about through the years. But yes, we're very cognizant of that can't continue on.
Absolutely.
So we're so much farther above the 15% that we have to contain for like backup, right? And you said we were about like 20%.
Correct, yep.
And with that extra money, don't expect you to give me a dollar amount, but would that cover the rest of the debt obligation on parcel B that the developer plans on paying off?
Trying to do math in my head, 1 second.
Because that was like $330,000, I think, that they were giving us for the purchase of the land, which was supposed to take care of that debt obligation.
I would want to double check, but I believe that would be possible, yes.
Okay, just a thought. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
So again, if you can get the questions to city manager by October 12th, have had some conversation about what those work sessions should look like, which order the big things we need to talk about are gonna come through. And we're probably gonna have like 2 issues, if you will, like 2 larger topics per work session on the budget to get through these items. So we're trying to do our best with these work sessions. So having those questions ahead of time so staff can A, look up those answers for us, and B, it helps us time how much time we need for those work sessions is important. And I believe the city staff is going to go through with both Commissioner Lalonde and Commissioner Joseph one-on-one with the budget. Is that a thing?
We're meeting with them jointly to help them understand how the budget's put together and how it all the pieces come together so that they have a better understanding since it's their first time.
Their first time through is a hard, hefty load to lift, so.
On October 8th, do we have topics that we already know we're going to be talking about for the work session?
I believe we talked about some of the downtown questions
and how those are related to the capital improvement fund.
And didn't we have a second thing we were talking about? Maybe we left it open because we might want to talk about snow shoveling.
Right.
Or blight ordinance, or one of the other many things. We also have 2 public hearings that night. So we have a lot of stuff. That was what we were going with for the first beginning part. Okay. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate your time and energy. And with that, without any objection, we will.
Can you imagine if we were going to a work session for blight?
We will adjourn the meeting.
Chris?
Yeah.